Welcome to Live 40 Now, where we explore what it really means to live fully, love boldly, and thrive in every dimension body, mind, soul, and spirit. Today's guest is, well, someone I know better than anyone, my husband, Roald. But you may know him as the founder of Live 40 Now, a coach, a musician, or someone whose heart just beats for transformation. We're going behind the scenes of his story from setback to breakthrough and unpacking the moment he started living and not just surviving. This one's real, it's raw, and full of practical wisdom for everyone who feels like they've lost their way. And it really is, one of those ready to find their voice again moments when you talk to him. So, without further ado, I'm going to move on. Okay, so every setback carries the seed of comeback. That's one of Rold's statements. Now, can you take us back to a moment you realized that wasn't just a quote, it was your life?
Yeah, I think for a long time, I wore my strength like a mask. So I was achieving, I was producing, always the one holding things together. Like you've got to be tough. Like you've got to not show emotion. You can't show weakness. But on the inside, it's falling apart. And so my moment wasn't glamorous. It was quiet. It was humiliating and in a sense, holy all at once. And it came when everything I'd built externally couldn't hold up to what was happening internally and what was breaking internally. And I remember sitting in my car just alone and numb, and that phrase hit me. You're surviving and not living. Something I'd heard somewhere from a certain speaker, but something in that moment when everything was just breaking just hit me. And that was kind of the seed. It was like, I didn't know it would become Live 4D Now one day, but I knew that I couldn't carry on just going back to autopilot, doing things the way I have been doing them up until that point. And so that is where, for me, that every setback, everything that's happened in my life carries the seed of like, that's not my permanent residence. That is not my permanent situation. And so, hey, I can make the best of it. I can live forward.
Okay, so you often say transformation starts when we stop pretending and start participating. I know from personal experience, you've been my how do I say, my cheerleader in the background, pushing me to get up early. And I'm not a morning person, for those of you who don't know. But what did that shift look like for you personally?
So a big one for me was that I had to admit that I didn't have it all figured out. So like I said before, for me, it was always like putting on this mask that, man, I've just got it all together. Emotionally, physically, spiritually, mentally, I've got everything together. So in a sense, I had to stop performing. I had to stop pretending that I was healed and that I was okay. But I had to actually start doing the hard work, the messy work of actually being healed. And so this is something like a lot of the guys, the Jordan Peterson and a lot of good mentors and mental health specialists will say, sometimes you've got to be so brutally honest with yourself. And that was the one thing I had to do. I said no to the things that just fed that image of like, you're perfect, you've got everything together, and had to say yes to the things that actually fed me, that actually fulfilled me, brought me joy, brought me life. And that shift looked like therapy, like real prayer, just a lot of time on my knees, facing some of the trauma, some of the pain from the past, and getting back into my body through movement and letting Tammy into my life versus keeping her at a distance just in case like she heard something that she wouldn't like. And so not just as my wife, but as a witness to the whole journey from the way I was to where I am today.
Okay, and what role did pain and the people who showed up in your pain play in shaping the whole work you do now?
It's always a good question. And pain's not easy to talk about. It's not easy to deal with because pain is often a very powerful revealer. It often strips you down to the raw material, the very basics. And in that place, that's where we find out what's really true about myself, about others, about my convictions, my beliefs, all these kind of things. And so there were people in my life, mentors and friends, and especially Tammy, who didn't just try and fix me. A lot of time they just sat there with me. They were just there. And they reminded me that my worth wasn't built on my performance. It was just in my presence, just the fact that I was there. Because for me, it was a lot of the time, it was just like everything. If I was successful, if I was achieving externally, if I was doing well at sport, if I was doing all these things externally, that meant I was worth something. I was lovable. I was acceptable. So these mentors, friends, and Tammy helped me change that perspective. And that changed or shaped how I coach. So I don't show up to solve problems. I don't show up with an agenda. I just show up to see, to understand. And that comes from being seen when I thought I was unlovable.
Let's talk a bit about your coaching philosophy. So you said you don't give people the answers, you help them remember who they are and work through their problems themselves. Why is that important in your coaching style?
So something I've come to learn and through coaching, I think, sheesh, over 4,000 clients over the last couple of years. I believe that the answers are already in you. But the world and the noise and the chaos and sometimes the pain and the trauma buries those answers. And so all we see is the issue. All we see is the trouble. All we see what we're stuck in. And so my job isn't to be your guru, give you all the answers, be your Superman, because I don't have to live in your shoes. But in a sense, it's to hold up a mirror so that you can already see, or you can begin seeing again what God has put in you from the beginning. And so a lot of times real transformation doesn't happen when someone tells you, this is who you should be, this is what you should do, because then you don't own it. It happens when you finally remember who you already are and look forward to who you could become. And core, what we talk about, is built on that principle. We all have the ability to find our own strategies. We all have the creativity. It's just drilling down and actually figuring out what that actually is.
And how would accountability play a part in this?
So accountability is really good because as we grow, as we make these small changes, it's helpful to have that someone that is by your side, not to judge you, not to tell you what to do. You should do this, you shouldn't do that. But it's a way to say, hey, you said you were making these changes. How can I help you achieve those things? How can I help you grow into the person that you want to become? So in a sense, they accept you as you are, but they're also there to encourage you, motivate you, build into you to become the best version of yourself.
Okay, so the core method has become central to everything you do. It's one of the main focuses of Live 40 now. Can you walk us through each element, the conditioning, the observation, resilience, and enlightenment, and how it came to life in your own personal journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So the dream really started like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, probably close to 10, 15 years, somewhere in there. But the idea was that I started just through my own journey, realizing that we're not just our body. We're not just our mind. We're not just emotions or just our beliefs and values. We're actually all of them. But a lot of the time people live separate or like scattered lives. And so they'll focus on one of the or the other. And so the idea and the concept was always like, how do we make all four of those dimensions work together versus actually fighting against each other a lot of the time? So the concept came with conditioning to your body, but it's more than just your body. Because we can go to the gym, we can eat well, we can rest, we can do all of that stuff. But conditioning is also what shaped us. The thoughts from our past experiences, the lessons we've learned, all of those things influence our conditioning. And I had to relearn what it meant to really live in my body, not punish it or escape from it, but movement, rest, and nourishment. Those things became sacred again. Similarly, when we talk about observation, often there's what we call this mind-body connection. So what you focus on the most, you typically feel the most and then act on the most. And so for me, I was trapped in those loops of shame and fear. And it looked like for me, I needed to learn to step back from my thoughts, to question them instead of just becoming them. And that changed everything. I realized that I didn't have to chase every single thought, especially the ones that didn't serve me or potentially sabotage me, and learn to focus on the thoughts that help me grow, that help me change, to help me become better on a daily basis. So that's conditioning. So the body, observation, our mind, and what happens there. And there's a lot more to this than this, but just for the sake of time, I'm giving you a high level overview. But when we talk about resilience, we're talking about the soul. And this is when we're talking about emotional truth, reconnecting to grief, to joy, to anger, without needing to be fine all the time. And so I had to rebuild from the inside out, especially emotionally. It was probably one of the bigger ones. And then finally, when we talk about enlightenment, we're talking about the spirit. Now, I have to clear this up because a lot of people will, this question's going to come up, but it's not about chasing some cosmic version of enlightenment. That's got nothing to do with the enlightenment movement at all. And a lot of the world tries to sell you that. Find your own enlightenment. But for me, it's more about alignment. It's about getting back to God's original intent for my life. And that meant stepping away from and shedding a lot of the borrowed beliefs from people, from pastors, from all those things, and really untangling a lot of my performance-based faith and learning I needed to hear God's voice again for myself, not just for others, but for me as well. And a verse that carried me through a lot of this transformation and struggle in our life, and Tammy, my wife, who's speaking to you, knows this well. But Romans 8:28, and it says, "And we know that in all things God works for for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose." That verse has been an anchor in my life for as long as I can remember. Even when the pain sometimes just doesn't make sense, when other doors close and when things just fall apart, I learned to stop focusing on the moment and started trusting the outcome. And I realized that through life, like God's plan is always better than mine. Even if I can't see it yet, I can lean into the process with faith and not with fear. And so call isn't just about growth, it's about trust. And enlightenment is where I gave up needing to understand everything and started walking like God really is who He says He is.
What's one coaching session or breakthrough moment that stayed with you and why?
There's a bunch. One of them, there was a session with a client who just hadn't experienced emotion for a very long time, for like over a decade. And during our work together, something just broke safely, not out of collapse, but rather just out of a surrender, like, hey, I'm allowed to feel. And when he looked up to me, he said, I didn't even know that this was allowed. And that just stuck with me. It's like, yeah, a lot of people don't know. It's okay to feel what you feel. From their past, people will shut them down. People will tell them what to feel, how to feel. A lot of times we just suppress that. And this was one of those clients. He just couldn't feel. He had suppressed the emotions so much that he became numb. And so that moment that came when he just emotionally released was a case of freedom for him. And so sometimes the biggest breakthrough is giving ourselves permission to feel and not to be judged for it. But part of that, another story was also one lady that I coached who just in her crisis had lost her sense of fun. She said, I want to be me again. And so we explored what that looked like. And over a period of time, from being very down and depressed and people not really wanting to hang out with her, she became known as Smiley. I'm going to just call her Sue. That's not her name, but just for her privacy's sake. But everyone in her life recognized the changes that she had made. They were small, but they made a huge impact to where she influenced the people in the grocery store. She influenced her people at her work, where it actually led to her getting promoted 2 or 3 times. And this is that thing, is it's just sometimes it's the small shifts that leave a huge impact in our lives. Another lady I coached really was just struggling in her faith. Like, was it okay to question God? She felt that she had more questions than answers. And so she would just keep quiet, and she would be stuck in a lot of that, just like, I don't know what to say. I don't want to ask the wrong questions. I don't want to be ostracized from my community. And through a lot of our conversation, she just realized that it's okay to ask questions, firstly of God, but also of the people leading you. And it's not out of arrogance. It's not out of to prove people wrong, but it's like, hey, I've got to figure out my life. I've got to figure out my faith. What is my worldview? How do I live this out practically for me? And so for her, the breakthrough really came is when she understood it's okay to ask questions of herself, of God, of the people around her, so that she can refine what it looked like to be in alignment with her faith, with how she wanted to walk with God, etc. And so those, like, I mean, there's hundreds, but those three have always just kind of stood out in my mind as quite big moments.
Okay, so you've coached quite a few different people. You've coached leaders, creatives, people rebuilding in various stages or situations, from premarital to relationships in distress, empty nesters, people dealing with grief, schools, kids, teachers. I've watched you go through quite a few different ways of helping people, even athletes. What do you think is the thing that most people get wrong about what it means to actually thrive in their lives?
I think a lot of times they think that thriving is the absence of struggle. And actually, it's not. Thriving really means being fully alive in the midst of the struggle. So it's not about perfection. It's about, hey, I'm being present in this moment. It's about showing up to life with all 4 dimensions engaged. So most people are living, I mentioned this earlier, just fractured lives. They work on one area and they neglect the fact that all 4 dimensions need to work together. And so thriving really means integrating, again, the body, the mind, and soul and spirit on purpose, so they work together instead of working opposed to or against each other all the time.
Live 40 now is more than a coaching brand, it's a movement, is what I'm understanding. What's the legacy you're building, and what do you hope people carry from it?
Yeah, so the goal behind Live 4D Now was not to boost our name. This is not for us. This is not about building our personal brand. It's about freedom. And so I like to see it as a movement, because I want people to live integrated, authentic lives where they're no longer outsourcing their wellness to their worth or their worth, where they stop surviving and actually start thriving. So if someone can say, you know what, I got my life back and I did it in 4D, then that mission is complete for me.
So, from my view as your wife, okay, for the past 15 years, I've seen you evolve through music, business, healing, all different aspects. So, what role does creativity and faith still play in your resilience today?
Yeah, so a lot of that is really like my my oxygen. And so Tammy will tell you that a lot of it, music, kind of lets my soul speak when I don't have the words. So whether it's playing music or listening to music, it's got to be somewhere in my life. Faith, and I mean real faith, not just religion, is where I anchor when everything else shakes. And so I got saved when I was 12. And so that's the best part of what, 30 something years. And so that thing has always been part of my life. And I feel like at times when I've walked away from that, when I haven't been as intentional and not living by my own convictions, is when I started swaying, is when the reed, in a sense, started bending too much. And so my faith is probably the one of the biggest things that helps me stay grounded and just open, even in the midst of chaos. But without the faith, it's often where I start struggling. And a lot of times through music or just through my creativity in creating courses and creating some content, expresses what healing reveals. So through my own journey, a lot of that stuff now needs to come out. I feel like it's my way of giving back. But then my faith, my relationship with God, is what sustains a lot of what that healing has birthed.
Okay, so what advice would you give to someone right now who's where you once were, disconnected, discouraged, and unsure where they are to begin?
I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but a lot of times we aim for the big thing, the huge or the biggest possible change. And a lot of times that's like hitting a brick wall, because that thing is often very difficult to move. So I always suggest, let's start small. You don't need necessarily a 10-year plan. That's really good. We can get there. But sometimes I need one honest breath, one honest moment of reflection in myself, one brave choice. Maybe it's just like I've got to step out of safety into something that challenges me. But one quiet yes as well is like, hey, I actually need to give myself permission to heal. So I always suggest start small, stack it. Because over a year, I always say, if you do something for 1 minute today, at the end of the year, you've done that thing 365 minutes. And from day 1 to day 365, you're guaranteed to be better. So start small, be consistent, and don't do it alone. Find your people, those people that motivate you. In my case, Tammy is one of those people. Find your core: conditioning, observation, resilience, enlightenment. Because your comeback doesn't necessarily begin with clarity. It begins with the commitment, taking that very first step.
So I've personally watched Roald walk out his healing, not just in theory, but in action. It's been a very powerful testimony in my life just watching him walk through all of this, and what he teaches, he lives, and what he lives transforms others. It's transformed me. I've watched Roald in action, and I've been on the receiving end of his understanding and guidance. He's thoughtful and empathetic, but helps you learn to process and become stronger. He's the training wheels on that bicycle that you have that you got to learn from, and eventually those training wheels come off. So he's there to help you guide on that. And I wouldn't have it any other way. He's an amazing person to work with. So if you're looking at coaching, or if you're looking at just being part of a community, you'll see that there are links in the bottom of this video that will have all the information on where to find and book one-on-one sessions with Roald, or to join our community. I hope you guys have an awesome day. Enjoy.
Yeah. And so just as a final thought, we would love to have you guys part of our community. We have different providers, not just us. And as the community grows, you're going to be part of like-minded people. We're going to have free resources, get-togethers, training, all that kind of stuff within the Skool community. And so like Tammy said, go and check out those links. We'd love to have you there, get to know you a little bit better. And there's some benefits to that. So there's some reward. If you invite people, as the community grows, you stand the chance of having some commission added or financial gain for yourself as well. But here's just a final thought or insight from my side. And if I can encourage you to journal this today, is ask yourself, like, what part of my life have I been outsourcing to excuses or fear? And what would it look like if I chose to participate instead? So instead of living stuck and just getting by and surviving, like, what would it actually look like if I took that first step, said yes to healing, dealt with my grief, dealt with my pain, or hey, just took that step that took me from safety but into something that's a bit more challenging? What would that look like? What would that first action step look like? And where would that lead me down the line? So thank you for being here with us, and it's been a pleasure. And again, normally I'm on the other side of the camera doing the questioning, and so it's been awesome to be here with Tammy. But we love you all. Hope to see you soon in the community, and look out for more episodes. See you soon.